New York Mayor Bill de Blasio speaking out in support of the DREAM Act just 1 week after passage of the law failed in the New York State Senate. And while de Blasio is backing the law, which would grant undocumented college students state financial aid, voters in New York State, they're strongly opposed to the measure. That, at least according to a new Siena poll, it shows 56% of New Yorkers here oppose the DREAM Act, while 39% say that they support the bill. You surprised by the poll differences? I would have expected, at least in New York, that the numbers would have been flipped.
Yeah, I would have expected it to be narrower. I still expected it to turn out that way, but I didn't expect the margin to be quite so big. And I hadn't seen earlier polling, if there was any, on where people stood on this. You know, it is a hard, it's a hard act to sell. It really is when you think about it. Regardless of how blue the state may be and how liberal people may be, it is still a hard pill for people to swallow.
Do you think it's because respondents think, hey, that's money coming out of my kid's pocket, or do you think that they mind it because the population that would benefit aren't deserving?
Because it's money coming out of the public pocket that should be going into other places. You know, you think about the way that these questions are posed and you think about what people know about the DREAM Act. I mean, it's one thing. I heard a young woman talk about how it would benefit her, and that's very moving. We haven't heard a lot of that. When you just hear where the money's come from, it's not even so much, I think, who it's going to support, but where the money's coming from and whether, in fact, that makes sense for the policy of the state and the nation as a whole.
I would have thought this was an easy sell. Obviously wrong. In New York, I'm not saying in Tuscaloosa, but in Alabama, in Albany, I thought this would play.
It's tough. The economic downturn really took a lot out of sort of like the public sector. Schools, everybody had to, like, you know, kick back a little bit, and because of that, they're like, you know, we're starting to get, you know, the economy's starting to get a little better now. You know, we bear the brunt of this. Why should, you know, those that are undocumented right now, you know, take advantage?
I think they're getting a free ride. They're
no,
just
they're
considered
not.
New Yorkers, and I know the same polls say that they shouldn't. At least I've seen in New York here that those kids, you know, they didn't choose to come here and everything else. I mean, all the numbers I've seen in New York on immigration have been on the other side of the ledger. This apparently is
splits between upstate and in the city. Obviously,
yeah,
in the city, it's much more popular and much more progressive. I'm curious because Jeff Klein from the Bronx is taking some heat for this. There's talk of him maybe getting a primary challenge to his left. I wonder if you think that this could hurt Jeff Klein's standing.
I don't see how. I mean, all along the activists wanted a vote. They finally got a vote, and it didn't pass. Every member of the IDC voted for it. It was a vote, though. I mean, it was a vote, though. They had never even gotten that far before, like, ever. You know, they've been advocating this now for, I think, 3 or 4 years. 4 years. So I don't blame Jeff Klein at all. He brought it to a vote. He did what he said he was going to do. The Democrats, two of them voted against it, and they thought they had one Republican that was going to vote for it from Long Island, but he wasn't there, and he said he would have voted against it.
You mentioned Klein. Now, Klein, talk about a guy who's got an interesting year ahead of him. Sometimes he's got, am I Democrat or Republican? Which one am I? This one. But, and the governor, he's pushing for campaign finance reform. It's now in the home stretch as the budget deadline draws near, and opponents of the overall ask, wait, why should taxpayers be held accountable for funding political campaigns? Now, supporters say, hey, reforms, they'd pave the way for more potential candidates without all that money here being such an obstacle. This again, Dominic, you got you know, the deck chairs. I mean, who's with who on this one? There seem to be conditions that got to be attached for people to vote a certain way. We bring our friend Mr. Klein back in on this one. This is another interesting one. It sounds good on paper, but again, when you're talking money and politics, not all the usual suspects are going to vote for this or vote against it.
All types of deals being cut on an issue like this one. And New York City went through the same thing. I'm sure we all remember, but before public financing. And there are going to be loopholes with everything, you know, that we don't find out until years later. For example, the New York City system that, you know, okay, the public is financing these campaigns at what, a 6-to-1 rate. Yeah. But what they found out is I can hire my boys to run my campaign, you know, and they're just making money, you know, a ton of money. So we'll see how this plays out. But it's the same political maneuvering, and it's going to continue to happen.
All incumbents are going to be against this because these are the guys that take in all this money. I mean, I work with these guys. It's amazing the amount of time spent just on raising money. I mean, if they spent half that amount of time on legislating to try to get the DREAM Act and other things passed, I mean, everything would be passed. You know, we'd have so much more progress in this state and throughout this country. I mean, they're nonstop. I mean, I worked for a member of Congress who was, you know, 50-50, you know, type of seat, and Constantly. I mean, we would have to raise $25,000 a week in order to
nobody
make
feels
goal.
bad for him, but
it's
it's
amazing.
7 days a week, isn't it?
Oh yeah.
But
Oh yeah.
It also
doesn't stop.
The parade of lawmakers from Albany we saw going to jail in the last 2 years.
Yeah.
I mean, in one indictment after another for taking all of this illegal money. I mean, the names, there are too many, and the pictures, there are too. This is one of the steps that might actually resolve some of that or ease some of that.
Although you still have, and there's no perfect system, but if you have a Bloomberg or somebody out there who says thanks but no thanks on campaign financing, just so everybody at home knows, you don't have to be a part.
You're not a Bloomberg. I'm not a Bloomberg.
No.
Dominic's not a Bloomberg.
Yep.
We deserve a voice.
You talk to
Yes,
candidates in New York City. You talk to candidates in New York City. Many of them would tell you, without public financing, there was no way in hell they could ever run for office.
And we should say money in politics in this country is an enormous problem for all of us.
And the problem is, unless
may
you
not be the
unless you
answer,
start
but it's a
completely
huge
from
problem.
scratch, once you get elected, just like Jonathan said here, there's a disincentive to play by these sets of rules, and that's why this is so hard to fix. Okay, now Sunday, in a speech at New York's Riverside Church, Mayor de Blasio, he took a much softer approach when addressing the controversial charter school issue.
The original notion of the charter movement was to innovate, to create laboratories for new and better ideas that then could be brought to the whole traditional public school system. That's a positive vision we have to re-engage. The idea is not to create separation, the kind of competition that works for some and leaves others out. The idea is to create a fullness, a totality, a completeness in which our charter schools help to uplift our traditional public schools.
Sounds a little different, Dominic.
It's called taking a pounding in the media. This is an issue, a battle that he didn't need to fight. He should say to the UFC, listen, I love you, but you got to
Tell everybody
go.
how it works. Like, they couldn't see it, but who's sitting in the front row? Why did he choose Riverside Church? He knew cameras were. Talk about how this whole thing gets orchestrated.
Well, because Riverside is a very progressive type church with major players, and you know that as mayor, you have a natural audience, but you're going to get major play when you go to Riverside. And so all the major players are going to be there, and they're going to hear your remarks, and they're going to hear that you're backing away and no mas. I don't want any more fight. But it's already 70% going, the battle.
No, I was just going to say, it's interesting, if you listen to the speech, it is mostly from a PR perspective. His tone has changed. The policies he's advocating have not changed. He should have taken this approach early on. I mean, he has had a communications problem on this issue, and he should have taken this approach early on if he wanted to pursue this policy.
He kind of is going to get, not the whole thing he wanted, but he's going to get a victory, but it's not going to come off that way. It's going to come off that the governor got his way and he didn't because he can't take yes, I think somebody said.
Yeah.
But you work with the UFC here, right?
Yeah.
Were they just putting their feet up saying, thank you, Bill? Or did they say that he's spinning this because he said in the end those 3 schools, they'll find places for the kids. At the end of the day, it doesn't sound like he's capitulating on those schools.
No, I think at the end of the day, the UFC knows what he says at Riverside, at the church. You know, it differs what he's actually going to do, what his actions are. I mean, I think he's still going to maintain the policies that he preached during the campaign. It's just, and I think the UFC knows that. That's why they haven't really fired since this was on Sunday.
Yeah.
So no, I don't think it's a concern to of theirs at all. They understand the UPK fight is huge, and I would disagree. I would say, yeah, you know what, it might not see as a win, but nobody was talking about UPK before that. And sure, he's going to get this, and it's big. It's really big. It would never have been in the budget this year if it wasn't for Bill de Blasio.
I'm with you, but my only thing is he's chosen optics to make it look like he's not getting something out of it. You know, the thing is, sometimes you can lose, but the public thinks you win depending on how you spin it. He's done the hardest part. He's actually won an issue and gotten people to back off and the governor do something he never wanted to do, but he'll come off as the guy who lost to Cuomo.
But he's still going to leverage his supporters on to the next issue. I mean, this thing he put together is real similar. It's modeled after like OFA and what they did for Obama once he got in office. It's going to continue, and it's going to keep pushing out his agenda.
One additional optical observation from the charter school fight. 3 schools, we're looking at what, 1,000 school kids at those 3 schools, and the multi-million-dollar campaign blitz that immediately went on the air, hammering Bill de Blasio and all of this. You want to talk about optics? How about the strength of the charter school lobby?
How about Eva taking the kids all the way up to Albany?
That is putting this kind of pressure out there, and supporters of charter school will absolutely love that pressure. Supporters or critics of charter schools are going to say that may be one of the reasons why you need to be leery of charter schools.
And the other part of this are the teachers' contracts that are still up in the air. I mean, that is a big part when you talk about the UFT.
A whole bunch of contracts,
you know, 152. So, I mean, that's going to be a big part of this in terms of what happens going forward. He hasn't done that hard work yet.
Well, when we come back, the thespian, Dominic Carter here. Up next, de Blasio lets down his hair, and so does Dominic. We will have a look at some highlights from the Inner Circle dinner. That's coming up.